My name is Angela. I lived with my mother and two sisters, Marianne and Margaret, in a large house called Norland Park. It was our home for many happy years. My father loved the place very much, but when he died, everything changed. My father's property did not belong to us. It went to my half-brother, John Dashwood, the son from my father's first marriage. Father asked John to take care of us. But John's wife, Fanny, did not like that idea. She was proud, selfish, and rich. She wanted all the money and comfort for herself and her own little boy. Soon after Father's death, John and Fanny came to live in Norland Park. Mother, my sisters, and I became guests in our own house. We tried to be kind and quiet, but it was difficult. Fanny made us feel unwelcome. My mother, Mrs. Dashwood, was a very good woman. She was warm-hearted and full of feeling, but she often followed her emotions too. Quickly, I, on the other hand, tried to be calm and careful. My sister Marianne was very different from me. She was romantic and full of passion. She believed love should be wild, strong, and true. She laughed loudly, cried easily, and never hid her feelings. One afternoon, everything began to change. Fan's brother, Edward Ferrar, came to stay at Norland. He was quiet, polite, and kind. He did not look handsome at first, but there was something gentle and honest in his eyes. He talked to everyone, but he listened the most to me. I liked that. Edward and I spent many hours together walking in the garden and reading. I felt something growing between us. Not fast, not like in the stories Marianne loved, but slow and real. I did not tell anyone about my feelings, but I think my mother guessed. She was happy for me, and so was Marianne, but Fanny noticed too. One morning she came to my mother and spoke sharply. "Edward is my brother," she said, "and he will marry well. He cannot marry a poor girl with no fortune." Those words broke my mother's heart. We knew then that we could not stay any longer at Norland Park. My mother decided we must move to a smaller house. A kind cousin, Sir John Middleton, offered us a cottage in Devonshire, far away in the countryside. It was called Barton Cottage, near his grand house, Barton Park. Leaving Norland was painful. It was our home, full of memories of my father and of Edward. I wanted to say goodbye to Edward before we left, but I never had the chance. He was quiet and sad when we met for the last time. He only said, "I hope we meet again, Miss Dashwood." I smiled and said, "I hope so too." But deep inside, I was afraid we never would. Our new life at Barton Cottage was very different. The house was small but cozy, and the countryside was beautiful. Sir John and his wife, Lady Middleton, were kind to us, though they were sometimes too noisy and curious. They invited us to dinner and introduced us to many new people. One of them was Colonel Brandon, a serious but gentle man of about 35. He had kind eyes and spoke softly, especially to Marianne. He seemed to admire her very much, but Marianne thought he was too old and too dull. She wanted excitement, poetry, and adventure. One rainy afternoon, Marianne went for a long walk alone. The sky was dark and the wind was strong. When she came back, she slipped and fell on the wet hill. Her ankle hurt badly. At that moment, a young man on a horse rode by. He saw her fall, jumped down, and helped her. He carried her home himself. His name was Mr. Willoughby. He was handsome, charming, and full of life. Exactly the kind of man Marianne dreamed of. From that day, she thought of no one else. Willoughby visited our house every day. He read poetry with her, talked of music and art, and laughed with her in the garden. Everyone believed they were engaged, though he never said it clearly. My mother was happy for Marianne, but I was more careful. Willoughby was too perfect, too quick, too smooth. I wanted to believe he was good, but something in his eyes made me uneasy. One morning, Willoughby came to our cottage early. His face was pale and he looked worried. Marianne ran to meet him, smiling. But when she saw his face, her smile disappeared. "I must leave Barton," he said suddenly. "Lee," she repeated. "But why? When will you return? I cannot say, he answered. His voice was cold and strange. Marianne's eyes filled with tears. You cannot mean this. You cannot just go away. He said nothing more. He took her hand, pressed it quickly, and left. Marianne stood at the door, silent and trembling. Then she turned and ran to her room. I followed her, but she would not speak. For days she stayed alone, reading his letters again and again, but no new letter came. She refused to eat. She cried through the nights. I wanted to comfort her, but my own heart was heavy. Too, I missed Edward. I wondered if he had forgotten me or if his sister had stopped him from writing. One evening, while I was sitting by the fire, Sir John came in with a smile. Miss Dashwood, he said, we have visitors coming tomorrow. A very good friend of ours, Mrs. Jennings, and some young ladies you will like. I smiled politely, though I did not care about visitors. I only hoped that one day I might hear news of Edward Ferrars again, but life at Barton Cottage was about to bring more surprises. For me, for Marianne, and for our whole family. Before I continue rest of the story, please like, subscribe, share, and tell me where you are listening from. Your support means a lot to me. Now let's continue. The next morning, our little house was full of visitors. Sir John brought Mrs. Jennings, a cheerful old lady who loved to talk and laugh. She was kind, but she liked gossip too much. She often teased Marianne about Mr. Willoughby and asked, when shall we hear the wedding bells? Marianne turned red and smiled shyly. Though her heart was breaking inside, she still hoped Willoughby would return. I knew she suffered, but I could do nothing except stay near her. A few days later, 2 young ladies arrived, Miss Steele and her younger sister, Lucy. They were distant cousins of Mrs. Jennings and were invited to stay for a few weeks. The elder one, Lucy, was pretty and polite. At first I liked her, though I did not know her well. She seemed sweet and talkative. One evening, when we were alone, Lucy began to ask me many questions about Norland Park and about the Ferrar family. Her eyes watched me carefully. I wondered why she was so curious. Finally, she smiled and said softly, I think you know my dear friend, Mr. Edward Ferrars. My heart jumped, but I tried to stay calm. Yes, I said quietly. He is my friend, too. Her smile grew sharper. He is more than my friend, she whispered. We are secretly engaged. For a moment, I could not speak. I felt cold, as if all the air had left the room. Engaged, I said in surprise. Yes, she said proudly. For 4 years now, but his mother does not know. She would never agree because I have no fortune, so we keep it secret. I smiled weakly and said, I see. But inside my heart broke. That night I could not sleep. I lay awake thinking of Edward, his quiet smile, his kind voice, his honesty. Was it all just kindness, not love? I remembered every word he ever said to me, every look, every walk we shared. I had always believed his heart was mine, but now I saw I had been wrong. Still, I decided to keep this secret to myself. I did not want to hurt my mother or Marianne. My pain was private. Marianne's pain was loud and visible, but mine was silent and hidden. Days passed, and Lucy continued to talk about Edward. I listened politely. Though it hurt, I learned that they met when Lucy was very young and that Edward's family wanted him to marry someone rich, not her. She said she loved him deeply, but sometimes I saw in her eyes that she wanted me to know she had won. When Lucy and her sister left, I felt some relief, but then another event changed our lives again. Mrs. Jennings invited us to London for the winter. My mother was worried, but Marianne was eager to go. Perhaps Willoughby will be there, she said with shining eyes. I agreed to go because I wanted to protect Marianne. I did not want her to meet Willoughby alone if he was indeed in London. So we went. The city was full of noise, light, and endless visitors. Mrs. Jennings's house was warm and lively, but sometimes too loud for me. Every evening, people came for tea or dinner. They talked of parties, fashion, And love stories. The day after we arrived, Marianne sent a letter to Willoughby. She waited all day for an answer, but no letter came. The next day, she sent another. Still no reply. She began to worry. Perhaps he is sick, she said. Then one night while we were driving home from a party, she saw him. He was across the street, laughing with a group of rich people. She called out his name. Willoughby. He looked up, but his face changed. He bowed quickly and walked away. Marianne turned pale. He did not speak to me, she whispered. Why would he do that? The next morning, a letter arrived, but not from him. Not in his handwriting. It was a cold, formal note. It said he was engaged to a rich young lady named Miss Grey, and that he wished Marianne well. She read the letter again and again. Then she fell on the floor crying. Her hands shook and her tears would not stop. I lifted her gently and held her close. Marianne, I whispered, you must be strong. But she cried, he has broken my heart. He loved me. I know he did. How can he marry another woman? I had no answer. I could only hold her while she wept. In the days that followed, Marianne's health grew worse. She refused food and sleep. Mrs. Jennings and I were very worried. I tried to keep her busy, but nothing helped. One morning, Mrs. Jennings came running into my room. Miss Dashwood, she said, I have news. Good news. Mr. Willoughby is here in London again. I looked at her in surprise. Does he wish to see Marianne? Yes, she said. He sent a note asking if he might visit. When he arrived that evening, I met him in the sitting room. His face was pale, and he looked unhappy. Miss Dashwood, he said, I must speak to you. Please believe me. I never meant to hurt Marianne. His voice was low and full of regret. He told me his story. He said he truly loved Marianne, but he had no money. When Miss Grey, a rich woman, offered him marriage, he accepted because he was in debt. I was weak, he said. I lost the woman I loved because I was a coward. I listened quietly. When he left, I did not tell Marianne about his visit. She had already suffered enough. After that, we returned to Barton Cottage to rest. The journey was long, and Marianne was still pale and weak. I worried about her. One evening, while we were passing through a small town, Marianne became very ill. It was raining hard and the wind was cold. We stopped at an inn and called for a doctor. I sat by her side all night holding her hand, afraid she would not wake. By morning, she was burning with fever. I sent for help. That evening, to my surprise, Colonel Brandon arrived. He had heard of our situation and came at once. He looked at Marianne with deep concern. I will bring the best doctor, he said. And he did. For days he stayed near us. He brought medicine, fruit, and fresh air. He spoke to me with kindness, though his eyes were full of worry. I saw now that he truly loved Marianne, not with passion, like Willoughby, but with quiet strength and care. Slowly, Marianne began to recover. One afternoon, she opened her eyes and whispered, Eleanor, is this death? I smiled and said softly, No, my love, it is life. And you will live. When she was strong enough to sit up, I told her that Willoughby was married. She was silent for a long time. Then she said, I pity him, Eleanor. He has lost more than I have. Her words surprised me. She had grown wiser. After we returned home, Colonel Brandon visited often. He never spoke of love, but his care for Marianne never stopped. My mother saw it too, and hoped that one day Marianne might care for him. As for me, I still thought of Edward every day. I wondered if he had married Lucy. I tried to prepare my heart for the news, but it still hurt to imagine. Then one morning, a letter came from London. Mrs. Jennings wrote that there was a great scandal. Lucy Steele had broken her secret engagement with Edward and married his brother, Robert Ferrar. Instead, for a moment I could not believe it. Lucy, who had spoken of love and loyalty, had left Edward for money. I did not know what to feel, joy, surprise, or pity, but my heart beat faster because now Edward was free. That same afternoon, I was sitting by the window when I saw a man walking up the hill toward our cottage. He was thin and pale with tired eyes. My heart began to race. It was Edward. Farrar, he entered the room quietly. My mother greeted him warmly. "We are so happy to see you, Mr. Farrar," she said. "We heard you are married." Edward smiled sadly. "No, ma'am," he said. "It is my brother who is married. Lucy has chosen him instead of me." My mother looked at me quickly. But I kept my eyes down. I did not want Edward to see the tears. In them, he stayed for tea. We talked politely, but every word felt heavy. Then, after a long silence, he turned to me. "Miss Dashwood," he said softly, "I came to ask you something." My hands trembled. He continued, "I have loved you for a long time. I did not hope you could ever forgive my silence, but now that I am free, will you allow me to speak again?" I could not answer. I tried to speak, but tears came first. At last I said, "Yes, Edward." With all my heart. He took my hand, and for the first time in many months I felt peace. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds. I thought of all we had suffered, my quiet pain, Marianne's broken heart, our struggles and lessons. But now, perhaps happiness had found us again. When Edward spoke those words, I could not stop crying. For months I had carried the pain alone. I had tried to be calm for my family, for Marianne, for everyone, but now at last I could breathe again. My mother cried too. She was full of joy. "My dear Eleanor," she said, "you deserve this happiness." Even Marianne, though still pale and weak, smiled through her tears. "Now it is your turn to be happy," she whispered. Edward stayed with us for several days. He helped in the garden, walked with us, and spoke with my mother for long hours. He was quiet, gentle, and kind as he always had been. When I looked at him, I remembered all the pain I had felt when I thought he belonged to someone else, and now he was here asking for nothing but my heart. A few weeks later, Edward went to speak to my mother again. I waited in another room, my heart beating fast. When he came back, he smiled softly. "Your mother has given her consent," he said. "If you still wish it, I would like to make you my wife." I said yes. I could not say anything else. Our wedding was simple. We did not have much money, but we had peace. Edward had a small parish offered to him by Colonel Brandon, a humble home with a lovely garden and kind neighbors. It was not grand, but it was enough for us. Marianne stood beside me that day, her hand in mine. She looked happy again, though her eyes were softer now. She had changed. Her face no longer showed the wild excitement it once did, but a quiet grace. She had learned much from her sorrow. After my marriage, I lived near Barton Cottage. I often visited my mother and sisters. Colonel Brandon came too, always kind and gentle, never asking for more than Marianne could give. One afternoon, as I sat by the fire with my husband, Marianne came to visit us. She had been walking with Colonel Brandon. Her cheeks were rosy and her smile was peaceful. "Eleanor," she said, sitting beside me, "I want to tell you something." "What is it, my love?" I asked. She looked down, then up again, her eyes bright but calm. "I used to think love must be wild and full of tears," she said. "I thought only passion could make a heart true. But now I understand that love can also be quiet and kind. Colonel Brandon has shown me that." I took her hand and said, "He is a good man, Marianne. He loves you deeply." "Yes," she whispered, smiling softly. "And I love him too." In the spring they married. Their wedding was gentle and beautiful. Colonel Brandon looked happier than I had ever seen him. Marianne, in her white dress, looked calm and full of grace. She had found her peace at last. Our two cottages were not far apart, and we visited each other often. Sometimes I would sit with my mother in the garden, watching the sun go down over the hills. She often said, "My daughters are happy." What more could a mother want? Life became simple again. I learned to enjoy the small things, the sound of Edward's voice as he read in the evening, the laughter of our friends at Barton Park, the quiet comfort of home. Still, sometimes I thought of the past, of Norland Park, of fans' cruel words, of the day we left our first home. So much pain had come from pride and greed, yet so much good had come from patience and kindness. One rainy evening when I was sitting near the window, Edward asked softly, "Do you ever wish things had been different?" I smiled. "No," I said. "If they had been different, perhaps we would not be here together." He smiled, too, and we sat in silence, listening to the rain. As for Marianne, her life with Colonel Brandon grew happier each year. He cared for her as tenderly as he had when she was sick. He never raised his voice, never demanded her love. He simply gave it every day. And she, who once lived only for passion and poetry, now found joy in peace and understanding. Sometimes when we all gathered at Barton Park, I watched my sister and saw how much she had grown. She was still lively and sweet, but her heart was wiser. She often said to me, "Eleanor, I once thought you were cold, but now I see you were only strong. Sense is not the enemy of feeling, it is what keeps the heart safe." Her words made me smile. "And sensibility," I said, "gives life its warmth. Without your heart, Marianne, our family would never have loved so deeply." We laughed together. The pain of the past had become only a memory, something that had shaped us but no longer hurt us. Years passed. Our mother grew older but still cheerful. Margaret grew up and often visited London. Sir John still told his funny stories, and Mrs. Jennings still laughed too loudly and asked too many questions. But whenever I looked around the table at Edward reading quietly, at Marianne listening to Colonel Brandon with shining eyes, at our mother smiling at us both, I felt thankful. Life had not given us riches or great fame, but it had given us something better: peace, love, and understanding. We had learned what true happiness means. For Marianne, it was learning that love is not only fire and music, but also patience and care. For me, it was learning that sometimes, even when the heart breaks in silence, hope still grows quietly beneath the pain. Our stories were different, but our lessons were the same: sense and sensibility, reason and feeling. Not enemies, they are sisters like Marianne and me. Together they make life whole. And so as the sun set over the green hills of Barton, I felt grateful for everything, for the laughter, the tears, the lessons, and the love that time had finally made gentle.